and welcome to the KIT Link Interviews, the Transatlantic Update. My name is Esther Legand, Head of KIT Link, based at Karlsruhe's Institute of Technology. KIT Link is a strong bond between the German Southwest and the Silicon Valley, the bridge between the Karlsruhe's Institute of Technology, one out of 4 universities of excellence in the German Southwest in California. When we started our interview series in April, we were aware how important it is to reflect on redefining transatlantic partnerships in troubling times. We have received great interest and feedback. Today, we want to highlight one of our partners, the German American Business Association. GABA's active community includes leaders and professionals from the most prestigious organizations as well as agile startups, small businesses and service organizations. Technology, entrepreneurship, new customers and partners, whatever your current business interest, chances you will find that one of their members can help. Together, we join across sectors and continents. We share visions and empower their realization. All KIT Link partners, such as GABA, are involved from the very top and regularly join us at meetings here and in the US. As we focus back on our first joint conference, the Transatlantic Sync, we focus since then on creating opportunities for exchange, sharing knowledge and expand connections. We need to share the power of the Silicon Valley and the German bond, the experience of executives and advisors, governments and academia in building strategies and programs. As the first German university, Karlsruhe's Institute of Technology recently signed an agreement with GABA to collaborate and to extend our partnership through an active exchange in the future. Greetings coming now from California, from Uwe Wagner, GABA board member and strategic management consultant, followed by the interview with the chairman of GABA, Thomas Neubert. Enjoy our series.
Hello, and thank you for having me. I met Thomas Neubert many years ago during a series of internal GABA strategy meetings, and he impressed me with his vision and constructive critics. I'm happy that he accepted the role of becoming our chairman, and we are all enjoying how Thomas is leading the GABA staff members and giving directions to a team of pro bono industry group chairs. Under his leadership, GABA is in the process of positioning itself as a major non-profit organization, fostering the relationship between the US and the German business community. And while many other organizations like us are fighting the fact that the pandemic is not allowing any face-to-face meetings anymore, GABA seems to prosper. Key to GABA's success is realizing early that virtual video conferencing and webinars are creating a great opportunity to reaching out to the world, inviting panelists who otherwise would not be available locally. A good example for what I mean by this is a series of panel discussions around COVID-19. As we all know, fighting COVID-19 has become a global task affecting people from all over the world, politicians, healthcare executives, universities, pharmaceutical companies, and many others who were forced to collaborate to expedite vaccination research, organize vaccine supply chains, and implement some very harmful and unpopular restrictions to our lifestyle. At GABA, we wanted to invite high-ranking experts from both the US and Germany to learn how 2 of the leading industry nations are teaming up and coordinating their efforts. We saw this being a great opportunity to reach out to other organizations, including the German American Business Council in Boston, the German consulates, the German embassy, but also across the Atlantic, where we recently signed a memorandum of understanding with KIT, the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. This exercise paid off in many ways. Over the last few months, we organized a series of panels attracting thousands of attendees. GABA became a landmark, and we started spreading our wings in countries we've never been able to reach before. Later, Thomas will elaborate on other activities he initiated creating a similar success, while I'm focusing on a series of panel discussions on topics which are very close to my heart: senior citizens and digital technology. The current pandemic sharpened our focus on the digital divide. Consider how the entire country has been homebound and older adults have been without access to face medical appointments, no visitors being allowed in senior living and care homes. The social isolation was extreme. Getting technology into the lives of older adults will be top of mind in the next few years. Less about products specifically designed for older adults, but about the marketing of many existing offerings that are useful to them. This includes smartphones, smart speakers and displays, virtual assistants, smart home technology, virtual reality, and in home sensors. In Germany, GABA is working on this topic with the Humboldt Institute, Fraunhofer, Deutsche Telekom, federal ministries, and others. In the US, we have been reaching out to OATS, Older Adults Technology Services, to bring together experts from large corporations and startups in both countries to create a series of panel discussions on senior citizens and digital technology. The quality of GABA's virtual sessions, enhanced by top experts from many industries and relevant topics, will help positioning GABA to become one of the most respected non-profit organizations on both sides of the Atlantic. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas, for being with us today. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing very well, thank you. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic, thanks.
Great.
Yeah, so we're here today to discuss how we've had to redefine transatlantic relationships, and partnerships due to the circumstances of the past year. But before we dive into that, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how the German American Business Association came about, since you're one of the founding members.
Yeah, it's like 18 plus years ago now, and man, the world has changed. Silicon Valley has changed, but 18 plus years ago, it was really the fact in Silicon Valley primarily that we had a small but growing German community, and doing transatlantic business where the internet was just coming out, and obviously we had emails, but even a few years before we haven't had that. So it came out of a need where individuals needed to help each other, and particularly to help each other in a trusted environment of individuals. And if you move somewhere else, you build your own business, you want to build a subsidiary, it doesn't really matter, but you always need help. Legal advice, HR advice, networking, distribution, customer partners, developers, you name it. And it started pretty much by a few people with what we all know in Germany, which is called a Stammtisch. And then you do that a few times, and then you pretty much have talked to anybody, that is showing up over time, and you have a beer. And then some people raised their hand and they said, I'm an expert in A, I'm an expert in B. Why don't I talk about it? Not just represent myself, but let's talk about this particular topic and share knowledge. And it literally, there wasn't a business plan. It was all naturally grown out of a desire for people, like-minded people, to build a network of trusting people. And I would say that is still in the core DNA of GABA in the past, of GABA today, and GABA in the future. We have adjusted a few things. We have obviously grown tremendously. I would say we have built an incredible reputation over the course of the years. But in general, I think that the DNA of being an alliance for corporations and organizations and professionals, literally with the purpose of strengthening the relationships, and always try to be on the forefront. We always want to talk about and share knowledge about technology trends. And I know in a minute we talk about AI, but there are so many other technology trends in healthcare, in in the environment, which obviously is very big in Germany and hopefully even bigger than also in the United States. But in general, GABA is an alliance of these multiple facet entities to come together and share knowledge and build relationships.
Mm-hmm. And it was interesting, you said, what's at the DNA, really at the core of GABA. And obviously, being one of the founding members, you are a part of that DNA. And you have recently come back to be the chairman of the board. And I'm just wondering, what brought you back?
Well, first of all, I mentally never left. GABA is just so in my DNA that I mentally never left. And people who know me, they know how passionate I am. And sometimes because of my passion, it's a blessing as a curse. Sometimes I go a little bit overboard, but I always mean well, I have to say. But I tell you what, the reason why I came back, or by the reason why I spent more time and I'm focusing more, is that at the moment we have an incredible, energized team in the leadership position on the executive side, as well as on the board side. And it was, I think, needed earlier in the year, last year, 2020, where we recognized we kind of lost our mojo a little bit over the years. By a little bit, but you could actually tell, and we had some surveys within the market and got some feedback from members and corporate members and things like that. But I think we actually felt it. I think the main trigger, and for many different reasons, was COVID. Like with many other people, it has had a huge effect on our lives individually and at work and traveling and all of that stuff. And what was related to the COVID situation was pretty much all the events, all the networking that we all as human beings, prefer to some extent to be in the physical world, disappeared overnight. I mean, literally overnight. So all of a sudden you have to figure out if you have an income and a purpose that is literally related to physical meeting of individuals for knowledge sharing and events and stuff like that. And now it's cut to almost to zero, actually to zero. Then you have to redefine your surroundings and you have to redefine yourself to adapt. And that's exactly what we did. We started that early in the year. We spent, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of hours, and we called it GABA, and we're still calling it GABA 2.0 for preparing for the next phase. Obviously, everything at the moment is all around the digital platform, digital communications, the web sessions and things like that. But that was just, I would say, the trigger. It was needed, and in hindsight, we called it, this whole period, we called it GABA 2.0, strategy definition and things like that. Then we turned it in December into the execution phase, where we had the plan, we had a new, mission, vision, all of that thing. And we turned it into the execution phase, and we are still at the moment in the middle of the execution phase. And then I would say, in a quarter or so, we are then using what we then have built and redefined and going to what I call the scaling phase. And the scaling phase is for me where, with the baseline that we have reset, with the foundation that we have rebuilt, and it's really all about just a few things, but they are really important, and we need to laser sharp focus on it. One is, we decided we needed to be relevant again, relevant in regards to the topics. We should talk about topics that are relevant for people. We want to help people solving problems, or at least bringing people together to solve problem, for and with each other. But it's that relevancy that has been maybe a little bit missing, and we are laser focused on that. The other one is, we want to increase the quality of our webinars, of the events, of the participants, of the topics. And then last but not least, and this is maybe a little bit also my Intel DNA, we want to be customer obsessed. But customer is a broad term. Let's be clear, right? Because we are a nonprofit organization, and we have students, we have individual members, we have small businesses, we have big corporations. I would put them all together into the customer obsessed session. So we need to understand what our corporate customers and the CEOs and the VPs in that organization, what do they need? What does a German CEO of a German subsidiary need in Silicon Valley, where in Germany, where they have a big brand, you know, the car manufacturers. I mean, you know, it's like every big corporation, at least in high tech that I can think of, has an office in Silicon Valley. And I've done this myself in my career. I built professionally international subsidiaries. And if you sit remote in a different country and you have to compete against, let's say for employment, right? You have to compete against a Facebook, a Google, a LinkedIn, an NVIDIA, and whoever is out there. You have different challenges than your counterpart in Germany. So we want to understand what that is. We want to help. We want to use the local experienced executives to give some advice. I have lived this my whole life for 30 years. I'm here 30 years and I've done exactly that. So that's what I mean by customer obsessed.
Mm-hmm. I think that's such a good point. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about that. But first, I just want to jump back for a moment to talk about the shift of focus that you've had to do because of the circumstances. You know, there had to be kind of a reevaluation of everything. And I'm just wondering, what changes have you made in GABA that has allowed this refocus to happen? And for instance, you talk about webinars and so forth. Maybe you can tell us about how the format of connecting people has changed, because I think this is really relevant for all transatlantic networks.
Yeah. So there are two sides to this, and I'm saying it with a smile because I'm somebody who, pretty much for 20, 30 years, I'm spending 4+ months away from home all over in the world. And I'm spending more time on a plane than, you know, anywhere else. That has changed from literally one day to the other by the last week of February. And since then, what is today? We have May 11th. I have not been physically in the Intel headquarters since last February, and we are not allowed to go in. I'm not even allowed to go in for the rest of the year, and I'm not allowed to travel. So I'm working from home. And that is a huge adjustment on so many different levels, right? Customer engagements, mentally, and all of that kind of stuff. GABA was in the same and is in the same situation. So the first thing that we did, obviously, is we looked at what digital platforms are available to move this old structure into something that can be, you know, digitally attended or observed. And obviously, like the entire world, is going towards desktop video conferencing. And in this particular case, a lot of people are using Zoom. Now, on a side note, I'm taking this with a smile. In 2001, I started to enter the video conferencing market and have been super passionate ever since. I evangelized desktop video conferencing for 9 years in my careers within 4 startups. And lots of my old colleagues have founded Zoom. So for me sitting here now and thinking it took literally COVID for people to adopt what we could have already done 20 years ago is just insane. But sometimes that's what it takes. So I think the world post-COVID will never be the same as it was before, to the better. I really, truly believe that. So the fact that we are talking here over video conferencing in a really good quality, right? We can bring in other people from all over, has its advantages. And that was one of the biggest learning also with GABA, that all of a sudden you always think about these physical networking events, right? You do it in San Francisco, you do it in Palo Alto. If somebody knows the Silicon Valley Bay Area, I live in San Jose. Well, I tell you what, in the old days, if you want to go to attend a GABA meeting, like in an evening in San Francisco, as an example, and I'm leaving my work at 5, taking traffic in consideration, particularly on a Friday, it takes you literally 2 hours on a bad day, one way. So what do? You may not go, right? Most of the time, for that reason, you don't attend. So it's all then locally to the people who are like close to San Francisco or close to Palo Alto. All of a sudden, you do everything digital. And guess what? People are joining from not just the Bay Area, from all over the world. We have more attendees. We have like 50-50 to some extent attendees from Europe. We recently had an event and I looked at the statistics. It was like 40% the United States, 30%, Europe, Germany particularly, of course. But then we have people from Hong Kong and India and stuff like that. It opens a whole new world of knowledge transfer, and particularly transatlantic, as I said before, it's in our DNA. And what a better way to do it digitally when you can invite anybody at any given time, considering the time zone. It's phenomenal. And that has been the biggest change, number one. Number two is, now having said that, you can now actually, if you are customer obsessed and you talk about problems or issues that people really want to hear, so you are relevant, you then have a much bigger pool of speakers. You cannot just invite a physical speaker just because he lives in San Francisco or Palo Alto. You can have a professor, you can have an executive, you can have anything you want from Southern California, where we have a huge footprint over there with our Southern chapter. But then you also tap in anywhere in the world to actually join our sessions. And that has been literally been reflected over the last months with the quality of our events. We are doing many, many more events than ever before, because it's a lot of work. So credit to our executive team and everybody else. And we call them our industry chair groups. Credit to them to put this all together on a regular basis. But it is easier to do that than constantly building this, physical a networking event. You have to find a physical place and all of that stuff. So all of a sudden, you are ending up with so many more events throughout the year, with so many more participants on a much global basis about relevant people. And if you take that as an end result, and we are just starting, GABA 2.0, we have not even a full force going forward and execute this, almost like a machine. But if you compare that to the time, like rightly shortly before COVID, it is a completely different world. So if you look back over the last 6 to 7 to 8 months, and you look at our website, you will find event series. They are super relevant in regards to the topics. But we also learned it seems to be a little bit more easier and more appealing to people to not just have like a one-off, meeting session. It's almost like a series. There needs to be kind of a silver lining between a certain topics and the sessions. And I think people appreciate that, because that's how we work, right? It's knowledge exchange. It's like, I have a question. I want to know more. I want to know more. I want to know from more people. So if you look back, we have done incredibly well in putting a whole venture capital entrepreneur event series together, very well received. Then we have at the moment still ongoing a COVID-19 series, where we talk about certain angles of COVID and how it relates to, Germany versus here. How do we managing it over there? Incredible speakers. And then last but not least, and we have others, women in business and other topics. And then the latest one that we have not officially started, but we are starting the series on May 25th, is the Transatlantic Artificial Intelligence Exchange series, which started with a little tiny idea. And I guess we have hit the nerve, because we have now the world's leading expert behind it, and many institutional people and the Bundesministerium and all the government people. They love the idea. Now we have to deliver, of course. But the fact is that this topic is so hot, and people have so many topics that they want to talk about, that what we initially thought would be like 1 or 2 or maybe 3 sessions, we have so much content that we are pretty much booked solid all the way through 2022.
Yeah, I think this is so interesting. And, just you talking about the richness of the Transatlantic Exchange that has happened, because of the circumstances, actually, the intensity, the richness, and how easy it seems to have been to build up momentum as well during this time as far as that exchange goes. I would love to talk more about the Transatlantic AI Exchange. KIT Link is also involved with AI and in the transatlantic context as well. And I'd love to hear more about how it did start as this little idea and maybe where it's hopefully heading.
Yeah, it's, again, sometimes life, is funny, and the little seed that you plant all of a sudden is growing so much faster. It's almost out of control. So you have to be careful. But it literally happened that with my passionate job at Intel, I started to dive super, super deep into artificial intelligence at Intel. On many levels, on the software tool for developers to do inferencing for AI, all the way over to the building a developer community for artificial intelligence in the security and surveillance space, to build an ecosystem there, and now actually more on the hardware side on how to drive and how to build the data center of the future, to be able to work with all the data that is coming towards us. And there is a wave coming that nobody actually is being aware of, at least not on the outside world, but it's huge. The other thing with AI is, and maybe that was the reason why it actually has gotten so much attention, AI, at least personally for me, is a unique technology, because I compare it a little bit with the internet, so to speak. And the reason why I'm saying that is, for me, AI is not a vertical kind of a thing, like healthcare and transportation and things like that. AI is a horizontal overlay that literally will touch every single element of our lives going forward, commercially and personally, on everything. And what happened was, I was contacted by our good friend Uli Südbeck, our consul general in San Francisco. And they know that I am obviously with Intel. They had questions about some papers that our CEO wrote to the government. And out of that conversation came the question, hey, can you tell us a little bit more about AI? Like what it really is? Because I have to admit, a lot of people, they know very clearly what it shouldn't be and how bad it is for the world. But if you ask every single person, well, tell me exactly what it is. Not that many people can really explain what it is. And yes, there's always two sides, right? There's always a challenge that comes with new technology. And then there's the positives. In my opinion, including the internet, the positives and the effect on human being will by far outweigh the negatives, although the negatives needs to be addressed with policies and things like that. I don't want to downplay that, but I'm more an entrepreneurial, positive thinking person. So I always think that the glass is half full. So with that in mind, I was like, fine, let's have a Zoom call. We talked about AI for what was scheduled half an hour, turned like, I think over 2 hours or something. It was like a really cool session. And then I said, also with GABA in mind, why don't I do like other IG chairs? I will put a few seminar series together about AI. And I just tell everybody what AI, could be, should be, what the opportunities are. And then I got introduced to a paper that was written a year and a half ago in Germany by experts, by the government. It's sponsored by the government, and it's called AI Made in Germany. Mm. That paper is publicly available on the internet, so everybody can read it. Phenomenally well written, very structured, very detailed, very German. So heads up, very good. But here comes the flip side. The flip side is, and this was the foundation of my pitch that I then started to develop over the Christmas time. And what happened was, it's like, this was really great. But now you look at the last 20, 30 years. And I have to tell you, I thought sounds controversial, but nobody has ever questioned me otherwise. Because if you really look back from a German perspective, there was the boom of the internet, there was the boom of the social media, and there was the boom of the cloud infrastructure, cloud adoption. In neither of these three mega trends can we as German name leading global established companies. and I'm really talking about, people may question this, and let's take SAP out of the equation for a minute, but we don't have a Facebook or a LinkedIn or something, or even a Tesla at the moment, I have to tell, in Germany. We don't. But you know what? It is what it is. However, let's figure out where we are really good at. And that's how I started to start my pitch and how to address the problem. I looked at what Germany is good at and what we are known for, the Mittelstand, the biotechnology, chemical companies, definitely automotive companies, right? There's so many great industries established with world leaderships on a global basis. If we can figure out with this really good, well-articulated plan called AI Made in Germany, if we can connect the dots there, we have something where we can actually take the lead in a lot of these areas. And I would say the core idea of Transatlantic AI Exchange is helping from where I am sitting at, helping that particular program in Germany for Germans to ignite, to inspire, and most likely to accelerate the efforts. Because it's not that we don't have the ideas. We sometimes just overthink, we overplan, we overanalyze. We always take time first to analyze the bad things before we come to the innovation. And by the time we are hopping from one to the other, a Facebook already exists, a Google does already exist, and and so that's, I mean, it's a reality.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
So I went out with that pitch and convinced, with a lot of other people's help, convinced leading AI experts literally globally to join this particular initiative that I started in November of last year. And again, our first session is going to be May 25th. And there's a lot of work that took place. And then the main message really is I take experts from all over the world. We will make damn sure that we have the highest quality of speakers in every single session, and every single session must answer some fundamental questions by the definition of it before we putting it live on the web. It needs to address the right target market, and the target audience is defined in the AI Made in Germany paper. It is the German universities, it is the research centers, it's the startup community, the investors, and the Mittelstand, and also the big corporations, but they pretty much know to some extent what they do, where they put the money and R&D in. But it's the whole, it's the ecosystem in Germany. So if I can address that with the experts to not just tell them how to do it, it's more like we will share the experience from here. If I take a super incredible, AI entrepreneur who is well funded with the famous VC firms, who may already is like 2-3 years ahead, and I can convince that person to participate in our session and help with his background and expertise that he already then have gained, or she, to explain that to a German entrepreneur, right? Or to explain, I'm talking to Berkeley right now and Stanford and some others, and they have these programs internally on the research side. And obviously Silicon Valley, by its DNA, it's a machine where they connect students with venture capital and the execution and partners and stuff. That place, in my opinion, only exists here. Yes, in Israel, and other people will say yes, in Berlin, not to the extent and the history of Silicon Valley. If we can tap into that knowledge and convince people to share that with the rest of the audience, and even if 10% of the program that's being defined for the German ecosystem is adopting some of these things, and we can help igniting something and accelerating something, or just put the right thought at the right time in somebody's head, an entrepreneur who just goes, leaves a university in Germany and wants to do fundraising, that's what this is all about. Taking what's already there, take the knowledge, share it over there, and who knows what comes out of it. And I make a prediction. My prediction is, with this little tiny thought of one webinar session, we can talk again in 2022, maybe in 2023, and I have a prediction that these this program will exist and will go forward. But that's just one dimension. If you now take what I just said and you think about what else can be done with it, I mean, it's the sky's the limit. You can take the infrastructure built in Germany, like the IHKs, for example, and they can take the same pool and the same knowledge, and we will help them with that. And they can do regional, local physical events for the Mittelstand in Germany, in whatever city, and do it locally. For agriculture, I mean, I have friends. I'm from a little village with 2,500 people in Germany. If I talk to my Stammtischkollege, so to speak, who is a farmer, about drones and all the chemicals and Internet of Things sensors, in the field, I am not sure he understands what I'm talking about. But you need, even in that example in agriculture, you need to look into this to stay competitive 5 to 10 years from now. You have to.
Absolutely.
So if we turn this into physical sessions post-COVID, and then maybe, with the support from the German government and whoever is responsible, you take even a group of these people, and why not inviting them over to Silicon Valley? And we have meetings here, and you meet people, you build a network, you exchange the knowledge in the physical world. So this whole thing, I think, over time will hopefully move from digital only to regional physical, and then also merge together, physically speaking, between the transatlantic. That's kind of the bigger vision. And not just for the Transatlantic Ai Exchange. It's for all the programs and all the topics that GABA has to offer. We just have to think bigger. And then we have to execute. And I think we can do that. And post-COVID, people will be more open to adopt and combine these various ways of transatlantic networking and knowledge exchange. And I think, to conclude, that is the biggest change that took place in 2020, unfortunately triggered by COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a positive that came out of a very difficult time, and what is continuing to be a difficult time. I just wanted to go back to this. I mean, what you're talking about is really, I think this is the question that comes up a lot, is how can you bring science and companies together? Especially in this transatlantic exchange, we see how well universities are hooked into companies in the States, right? There's a lot of kind of knowledge between scientists and researchers that are being shared with companies and startups and so forth. And then we're seeing in Germany that connection is not quite there yet. And what you have just said is, I think, a really good start to making that happen. Is there anything else in regards to that, making that leap between companies and science that you see?
I think so very much. And I was very impressed that it was actually already been acknowledged on the German side for Germans in Germany. It wasn't us telling somebody. And I give you an example. I mentioned earlier the target audience for this Transatlantic AI Exchange, which is pretty much helping to build the AI ecosystem in Germany, or accelerating it. And it obviously comes in multiple ways, right? The universities, the professors in the universities have to have the right content to teach the students about the depth of AI, like inferencing, how you train models and things like that. I don't think that's in everybody's mind right now, although that is something that is so established. It's the foundation of artificial intelligence and deep learning in the first place. That needs to be reflected in the curriculums. Then you have, obviously, entrepreneurial potential students who hopefully see the opportunity in building startups, with all the pros and cons that comes with it, particularly in Germany compared to Silicon Valley, but so be it. And then they have to have the right investors, and then the exit to the markets. But then you also have the research centers. And if you look at our website, you will notice that the early partners who officially, after I pitched this multiple times over, who immediately saw the opportunity, I was incredibly humbled and surprised that they actually stood behind the program. because the foundation is just there. It's just the right thing to do. So the very first, the founding member of this organization, besides myself, is AI Hamburg, my good friends Petra, Ragnar, Ingo, and including Oliver as well, because they have the German side, right? They have lived here, incredibly successful entrepreneurial people. They are passionate now in Germany and based in Hamburg, but it's really it's nationwide. They want to build and nurture AI, and they're doing that in many different ways, with a fund, with AI Hamburg, AI for Germany. So they were literally teaming up with me, and they believed that this is actually a good thing to do. But then when I talked through the consulate with like the Bundesministeriums and others, they actually liked it. And I made some very controversial statements, but nobody disagreed. So I guess everybody bought into it, what the challenges are. But coming back to your questions, the first organization who actually stood behind this 100%, and a particular person who actually put his name behind this, he's very famous and a humble person, is Professor Walster at the DFKI, the Deutsche Forschungszentrum für Künstliche Intelligenz. He stepped up and he helped and he made introduction. And then the acting CEO, Professor Antonio Krüger, he's now on the expert board as well. And then the KI Bundesverband stepped in. Obviously, GABA has been with me the entire time. And there are so many others. Olaf Groth is very well known here, a good friend of mine, Cambrian Features. And I pinged him right away because he's an AI expert, wrote a credible book, and he's a very dear friend of mine. So I put this group together and started this. But coming back to your question, what struck me, and I will never forget this, because I asked myself the question, why would the DFKI, who I've never known before, and certainly not Professor Walster, why would they be so actively supporting this? And they said it, and it still stuck in my head, because they said, we are connected to all the big corporations in Germany. Because of the founding structure, they're all members and shareholders and whatever, including Intel and Google's and whatever. And he said, we recognized we have a ton of good research projects within our facility from all the different companies. You take all these brain, ideas together, and you have really something incredible. But then he said, what is missing or what needs to be better is to nurture what we have and give it to somebody, giving it to the Mittelstand, giving it to the startup community. And they recognize that the link between their internal incredible development projects and efforts, with all the money that they have available, if you don't know what to do with it when it comes to the commercialization of it, or the productization of a lab research, then you are completely missing all the opportunities. And they recognize that from the very beginning, and they want to use this platform and the knowledge exchange to not only tell the ecosystem what they have, how they work. They want to invite the entrepreneurs and the Mittelstand to come to them and work together. And ultimately, and this is what this is really all about, it's ultimately accelerating the commercialization and the productization of whatever sits somewhere in the labs and in the ideas and in the heads of some people. And coming back to what I said way early on in the conversation, that is where Germany has a lot of room for improvements. It's that last thing, the commercialization and the productization, where normally other people in China particularly, but also in the United States, we are just faster because we just do things and throwing things out, and then we will, see if it sticks, and if it doesn't, you adjust a little, and then you throw it back out again, rather than analyzing and planning and analyzing again and planning again. So that's where we are trying to help and inspire people to, maybe look at it a little bit different.
Yeah, I love that. This is what you've just said has come up, I think, again and again, this idea that this kind of entrepreneurial spirit that America has, this innovative spirit. And sort of bias to action and the sort of fearlessness when it comes to failure is something that the Germans can really learn from. Whereas also, the Germans have this incredible commitment to precision and quality and deep knowledge that I think Americans can really, that side can really learn from as well. So it's a really, it's a very promising, I would say, connection that it can be a really, really fruitful connection. And I mean, it has already to some degree. And I think it will become even more so in the future, especially with GABA and, KIT Link. We're also hoping to foster those kind of relationships as well.
We have a lot in common. That's
Yeah.
why I like this conversation and the partnership. I think we have the same mindset, and if we combine it, we can do a lot of things. And I mentioned it earlier. When I defined GABA, we actually changed one particular word when we started the GABA 2.0, and we are calling it's not an organization or a nonprofit. We are an alliance. We are an open alliance. We invite partners. We want to align with anybody who is out there who has the same mindset, who wants to act on the same purpose in knowledge exchange, and then you just go from there. So it's as open as it can be for people helping each other and helping others.
Yeah, so well said. So well said. And, we talk about being a transatlantic bridge, but really it's more like a highway with many different lanes and paths, and we're all on that same highway to connect these two worlds. I wanted to just go back for a second and maybe even leave a little bit of GABA behind, just to talk about the impact of the pandemic on our lives, because I think a lot of ways we have seen a lot of negative come out of it, but there has been a lot of positive as well. And I'm just wondering for you, and if you're willing to share in other parts of your life, have you seen an impact that has been positive?
I have to. So first of all, I want to recognize that 2020 and even 2021, for a lot of people, way too many people, it has been devastating. It has been sad.
Absolutely.
It is a terrible thing. You cannot say it in any other way. But at the same time, I truly believe, as an entrepreneurial person, there's always something at the end that comes out of it that is better than it was before. I truly believe that, and I live by that. If I look back in 2020 and even today, if I look at my personal life, it has drastically changed. As I mentioned earlier, I have not been allowed physically to go to my office since February and the entire year this year. In the middle of it, I changed groups from the Internet of Things Edge group to the backend data center group, which means by definition, I have for the last year so far never ever met a single of my colleagues in person so far, ever. So which is kind of weird, but it is what it is. And that actually worked okay, I have to say. But not being able to travel, working from home, my wife works from home, my daughter has the entire last year is working out of her room. So we are literally together 24/7 for a year, when daddy normally is gone most of the time and they are used to it. So me being home is an adjustment in the first place. But having said that, there is the business side, there's the health side, and then there is the social side. And I have to admit, 2020, with all my goal settings that I have done for 20 years, very vividly with some of my friends, I have had the most successful year in 2020. And I almost felt guilty about it when I looked at my Excel sheet and I'm rating myself, and I looked at the numbers all the way, 6 to 8 years back. But the good thing is, I asked myself, why is that? What happened here with all the bad things? And as you know, it wasn't just COVID. I mean, I don't even want to talk about politics, but don't get me started. It was one of the most emotional, difficult years ever. There is no doubt about it. So many factors came together, and yet it was to some extent my best successful year. I'm healthier than ever before. I am mentally balanced because I don't have jet lags to deal with all the time. I eat healthy food because I enjoy my wife's cooking at home. But there's one thing that I really have learned to appreciate more than ever before, and I'm not the only one. I am the co-founder of the Silicon Valley Marathon Club. And I have dear friends for 15 plus years, and we run every Saturday. We travel to London, Tokyo, Berlin, all over the world together to run marathons. And then physically you meet, you travel, you meet for coffee on a Saturday afterwards and things like that. And all of a sudden it stopped from one day to the other. Now that was probably harder than anything else, because it's more a social group and we share things very private after all these years. We help each other with job situations and things like that. So what we did was we did two huge things, which we didn't know it was actually that important. One is I started, instead of meeting for coffee every Saturday, and after 11 o'clock when we run half a marathon or something, we are meeting for an hour over Zoom. First, it was that's kind of odd. It was really that way. But then you had a Zoom session with like 15, 20 people on it. And I still do it as of today. This is now going on for pretty much over a year. That's number one. And number two, we recognized on the internet, there are these incredible virtual runs. And people like, what's a virtual run? Well, let me explain for a second, because it's so awesome. First of all, the big majors, the Bostons, the New York, the Tokyo, Berlin, they were not allowed to run the marathons, right? But as a marathon run, it's almost an addiction. You need to do something here. So they turned it into virtual runs, which means you can sign up virtually. You run locally in your neighborhood. I know it's not the same, but still, you run locally with your team or on your own or whatever, and then you literally get a medal for that with the t-shirts. So I just finished the Hamburg Waterkant marathon, half marathon last Sunday with my friends Petra and Ragnar, who did something similar in physically in Hamburg. So it's just a fun thing to do. So then we agreed that we turned the two big ones into a physical run. So we met with like 12 to 15 people physically in the neighborhood. We put out signs from like a New York marathon, so it feels like you are in, you go over the Visona Bridge and whatever. But it keeps the spirit going. And physically, I'm in better shape than I was actually, pre-COVID, which is just incredible. But then we found out there are virtual runs that you can sign up for, and they track you on a Google map. And as a team, you can see everybody who is where. And I did Mount Fuji. I'm in the middle right now of doing the Romantic Road, which is from Würzburg to Schloss Neuschwanstein. And the interesting thing is, through this platform, when you have certain miles, they will take the money and they will plant a tree in your behalf. That's number one, which is good for the environment. Then you get a postcard. It's a digital, but it looks like a real postcard with a picture and handwriting to yourself or to somebody. I am in Würzburg, and then you get a whole list of historical facts to learn about all the milestones of these roads, which for somebody who has never done this before is just very entertaining and educational. So when we meet on Saturdays, we always say everybody can run, whatever the time it takes. I go for walks, I'm reading audiobooks, which I've never done before. And here's the funny thing. Towards the end, when we say it takes 3 months, all of a sudden you can see people are speeding up the miles that they're walking or running on their own during the week, because no matter what, it's still a little bit of a competition, because nobody wants to be last on that Google map when it comes to go over the finish line. But the two learnings is, it's the social aspect, the collaborative aspect, even if it's digital, that kept me mentally stable through all the politics stuff and all the challenges that we have had, even as of today. And having that social backbone that you can rely on is just incredible. If it motivates you to stay physically fit, that means you're also somewhat better mentally. It's just a physical thing that happens in real life. So that's number one. And number two is, and this is another interesting factor, if you meet with a group of people in the physical world for dinner, for a business dinner, for whatever, you normally speak to the people who are very close to you. So let's say you cover around 2-3 people who are sitting next to you over coffee, right? But if you have a long table with 20 people, you pretty much don't talk to the people at the end of the table.
Yeah,
right?
that's so true.
So all of a sudden, and then you have your little preferred group versus the other group versus the other group, right? It's just human behavior. Well, I tell you what, if you have a Zoom call and you do a Zoom call for 12 months with 15 to 20 people, and you moderate it in a way where everybody is going to speak up about how was your week, anything you want to share, can I help you? It's incredible. Everybody agreed that we learned more about and from each other in the last 12 months than in the years before, because every Saturday for 1 hour, you talk to 20 people all at once, and one person talks back to the other 19 people. And it has brought us even closer together as a community. It's just phenomenal. So if somebody would have ever predicted that, pre-COVID, it's like, no way. Some wonderful things have come out of 2020, I have to say, and they're here to stay.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful note to end this interview on, that through this really very difficult and trying year, that we have rediscovered how important connection is with each other, and that this digital world has in some ways allowed us to deepen our connection and to simplify it, in some ways where we can actually really focus in on it. I think that's a really good takeaway. Thank you so much, Thomas. It's been great. Now, just one last thing. I know you have this Transatlantic AI Exchange coming up. If people are interested in finding out more about that, or how they can also join or be a part of that, where could they do that at?
The first thing is they can go on the GABA website, where we are listing the upcoming events. We also have a website, and if you go on transatlantic.ai/exchange, you get all the information from the website. And we have, it's a very informative website. Again, we're just starting, but it's about the mission. We created a white paper to outline what this whole program is all about, and with some background information about the German economy and what needs to be done. So anybody feel free to download that informational paper. And if anybody has some ideas, if anybody wants to get in contact with us when we define what the topics are and the speakers, just send me an email. Probably better on my personal. So it's tneubert@gmail.com.
Perfect. And what we will do is we'll be able to put those links up for people that information for people to read and to get in touch with you. So thank you again, Thomas. It's been really fantastic talking with you. And we hope that we can hear from you again, maybe in a year or two, just to see where things are at with everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Appreciate it. And thanks for inviting me to this interview. I really enjoyed it.
Me too, but for us as well. So thank you again.
All right. Thank you.